Hi, I'm Jonna Till Johnson, CEO of Nemertes, and I'm here with my co-host.
John Burke, CTO of Nemertes.
And you're listening to Heavy Strategy, the show that tries to ask the right questions, not give the right answers. And on today's show, John, you wanted to talk about the importance of IT house cleaning. So take it away.
And this was brought to mind by a couple of recent news stories. We were recording Network Break 528 and had a story about threat actor Hazy Hawk, who has been hijacking the global DNS system for nefarious purposes. The idea being that it would scan domains for CNAME records that were pointing at endpoints in the cloud whose endpoints no longer existed. So the DNS name now resolves to an error or to a dead end. So Hazy Hawk then reinstantiates resources in the cloud with those identifiers, and now the DNS record points to them. And they managed to take over subdomains, trusted subdomains of governments, universities, Fortune 500 companies, and use the redirection to them to distribute malware, propagate scams, and do various other forms of bad things. That reminded me of a story from back in February, Network Break episode 513, where researchers at Watchtower did something that to me felt very similar, sort of a rhyming compromise, a supply chain attack where they would hunt down abandoned infrastructure, things that the build scripts or that the actual running instances of different kinds of open source projects still looked for, even though they no longer existed. In this case, they were looking at Amazon S3 storage buckets. So finding things like that in the list of resources requested, they would then go to Amazon and instantiate an S3 storage bucket with that name, and as soon as anything came looking for a resource, they would supply whatever they wanted under that name. So they were compromising or able to compromise application builds, replace executables that folks were looking to download, folks' build scripts were looking to download from those places. And so we're able to compromise builds in multiple countries, multiple militaries, members of the Fortune 500, the Fortune 100, and payment processors and other financial services companies. And all of that from both the Hazy Hawk attack and this other supply chain attack, all of that the result of messes not cleaned up at the end of a development process.
Well, okay, so a couple questions for you, John. First of all, how is any of this different from technical debt?
I'm not sure that it is. It may just be another form of technical debt, and yet it's one that is easier to deal with as you go because it doesn't rely on something becoming obsolete over a long span of time. It's something that's become obsolete by the time you ship code, essentially. And therefore, you should be cleaning it up as you go as an organization rather than just letting it hang out there because we're not using it anymore. We don't care about it anymore.
Well, so here's the thing. You use the "it" rather loosely here because
Yes.
it can be a domain, it can be a build, it can be a server, it can be, so maybe you want to tighten that up a little bit for the purposes of this discussion so people can kind of understand what the "it" is in this specific flavor of technical debt.
Oh, no, I don't want to clean it up too much because the idea is you're littering your environment with stuff as you go because you're not, picking up the scraps of paper as you drop them. You're waiting and waiting until, somebody shines a laser through your window and sets your house on fire by hitting those scraps of paper on your floor. No, you got to pick them up as you go. You got to clean the room before you leave the room. So whether it's DNS names, and yes, you should be sweeping your DNS regularly for abandoned names.
Well, let me
But
stop
also,
you there.
no, don't stop me. Also, you should be
but I want to stop
cleaning
you
them up
on
during
that.
the projects in which you're spinning them up and then deciding not to use them anymore.
That's why I wanted to stop you was you said you should be sweeping them regularly. is there automation that you can use that does that? Because you should be cleaning them up during the project. Sounds to me like a manual process. And I have another question I'll ask about that. But it seems to me that a regularly scheduled, like any of these hacks would have been avoided even if once a month there was a sweep that said, this domain is no longer being used. Hello, do you still want it? Are there tools out there, to your knowledge, that do that?
Absolutely. And it's not just a monthly sweep kind of thing that you can automate. It's you can build this into your build process that resources once allocated have to continue to be used in order to stay allocated. The build process itself can clean up after itself if you build it to do that, which takes extra time at the front, but leaves you with a cleaner environment at the end.
I understand that, but I'm pushing hard on the cleanup after the fact for a couple of reasons. Number one, belt and suspenders, and we'll come back to the during the build
Absolutely.
process. And number two, I think it's very difficult to determine during the build process whether you're going to use something yet again, particularly when you're talking about domain names. Certainly, while you're doing software development, it might be a little bit clearer, but it's not clear at all to me that anyone knows precisely when something has become unused, because there's no positive trigger that says this hasn't been used unless there's a time frame attached to it, as in the last 30 days, which says during the build process is not going to be the most optimal to catch this because that won't flag. Whereas you need something that says, hey, here are all the resources you haven't touched in the past 30 days. Do you want me to retire them? And that's I'm not saying not to do it during the build process. I'm just saying it's not going to, there's a very clear gap, because there may be things that people are still using, but in a decreasing amount, and that will ultimately become obsolete, but haven't yet. And once you're done with a project and you're on to the next one, that'll never show up.
I think you're probably right about that. Not 100% sure, but I'm dead solid with you on the belt and suspenders approach. Also on the assumption that there will be variable levels of compliance and enthusiasm in different build projects and different build teams. So even if you've got it built into your process, and even if your tools are helping, there's likely going to be some stuff that doesn't get cleaned up during the build, or, as you say, it's not apparent that it needs to be cleaned up during the construction process and not until you're well into production.
Yeah, because I mean, you entitled this episode, what was it, house cleaning, keeping the house clean. And one of the problems that those of us who do not have absolutely Scandinavian Spartan houses have is there is no red flag that says you will never use this tablecloth again, take it to thrift. And that is actually the problem with IT resources, where the penalty for getting rid of something that subsequently becomes needed is much greater than the penalty for leaving it there, at least the ostensible penalty for leaving it there, exclusive of the issues that you just raised.
And I think you make a good case for prioritizing the use of human attention on things that have external visible presences, for example. So like your DNS records, like your use of cloud resources, you're interacting with the outside world one way or the other, and directing more attention to things like that than to, in the larger technical debt sense, is that terminal server over there that is connected to the 6 things next to it still in use, or can I throw that away or take it to the thrift store? I think there's a lot of thinking to do there, but I want to keep coming back to the idea that we're used to moving fast, and if not breaking things, at least leaving messes behind us as we go. And we've grappled with the idea of technical debt in a lot of other contexts, but I think we need to push that thinking throughout our IT operations, throughout our development operations, and it's not just the stuff that's been around for 6 years that is going to constitute your technical debt. It might be stuff that's only been around for 6 days. But if it's trash, you don't want it hanging around in your environment, because it can attract the rats that bring the plague.
Great image. And all of us are well aware that if you leave plates with food on them, and hopefully we're only well aware of this because of something we did back in our college days, but if you leave plates with food on them, the roaches come. Coming back to that, though, it seems like one of the questions you need to be asking yourselves is, what is the definition of trash? In other words, how do we decide that something is unused? I've sort of alluded to a definition, which is if it hasn't been used recently, and by some definition of recent, past 30 days, past 2 weeks, I don't care what it is, but there are other definitions as well. You may have development artifacts that you might in fact wish to use again, but are cheaper, easier, and better to just rebuild when you need them. So it seems to me that one of the questions you should be asking yourself is, what is trash? How do I define what trash is? And then the corollary is, how old does something have to be before, what's the maximum age that I wish this piece of trash to exist in my environment? Is it a second? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 6 days? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? And the answer may vary, but that requires some sitting down and thinking about it, and also compiling a list of things that might be abused. I'm sure most of us didn't really think about domains until the Hazy Hawk thing came out. And there's lots and lots of other things we probably haven't thought about. So the second question here would be, what are these resources we're talking about? We're talking about domains. We're talking about, containers. We're talking about, what are we talking about? And I don't know that there's a comprehensive list that applies to everyone. There may be one that of which everything is a subset, but I don't certainly have one, and I know you don't, John. We're just
Nope,
tossing it out there.
I would throw out there, establish the things that have the highest potential for damage, which again is things with outside visible surfaces, and work your way inward from things like that. And lean on the automation. We talked about that earlier. There definitely
Yep.
are tools that are out there that can, say, scan your S3 buckets and see when was the last time you touched them. I suspect folks who abandon S3 buckets know when they abandon them at some institutional level. And so the obvious thing to do is then clean up any reaching out to that bucket once that bucket is gone. So purge the bucket's existence from the source code, or the build scripts or whatever, so that there's no ongoing ghost presence of that resource to hijack later. Things like that look real clear in retrospect now that we know how people monkey wrench you using them. Stretch your heads around other things that you're doing in your operations that reach out to external resources, or that create resources for other people to reach out to in your environment, and keep an eye on them. Have they been used? Are you abandoning them? Are others abandoning them currently? So you're thinking of discontinuing the service. And if you do, really clean it up. Don't just stop paying attention to it. Actually get rid of all the traces of it. Get rid of the unused API calls. Get rid of the unused DNS names. Deallocate the IP addresses, etc. Yeah.
Well, so here's a question. I'm going to push you on this, John, even though I know the answer, what I suspect the answer might be. You say there are tools out there, but I actually don't know of any tools that will address the range of resources at the level that you're talking about. I mean, I know something like Netbox should have most of that information, but I don't know that it does. And I don't know that it's tightly coupled to the development environments in the way that you're describing. So it almost sounds like either this is a product that we don't specifically know about, or maybe something that should be invented, or something that you're just going to have to write a script for because there's no clean and easy way to do that. Because I really don't know of anything that looks at everything at the development level that you just described, as well as looking at domains, IP addresses, and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, no, I can't call to mind something with that breadth of functionality either. I suspect what you're going to wind up doing is scripting at the organizational level, and possibly this is one of those things that code companions, AI, copilot type things in coding environments could help with. The scanning of the code, the indexing of all the external resources, and the tracking of when they stop being used. That's the sort of thing a computer brain might be much better applied to than a human brain. But I do think you're going to wind up with human level scripting to pull together the scans you need at the points in the development process when you need them, and after the development process during operations.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the whole notion of the human brain in there. I think the ideal automation is going to basically say, this is, this has been marked as trash. Do you want to agree or not? Um, you know, but I also think we're sort of skirting around the issue of how difficult it might be to come up with a comprehensive script like this. And I am wondering, I'll toss it out there. I know how skeptical both of us are on this topic, but is this possibly a good use for AI?
Yes, yes. As I just said, I think it's going to be an AI copilot coding kind of a task, at least in part under human direction, certainly. But yeah, it'll be the kind of thing that will be able to crawl through your code base, look for those calls to external resources, maybe watch the build processes and see where things start throwing errors because the storage bucket's been thrown away or whatever the equivalent is for the resource you're using. Flag that to human attention, say, is it time to clean this up by deleting the call to this thing? Or is it just a fluke that it's not been available the last 5 times we've built a production version of the code? That sort of unceasing attention and microscopic attention to detail, well harnessed in this case. And it's not going to be a single thing. It's going to be in all sorts of separate domains. You're needing to enlist these kinds of tools. So
that's where we get into agentic AI.
Right. Network management folks are going to be doing it with one set of things, IP addresses, DNS names, et cetera. Coders are going to be doing it with a different set of things. And
and then you have a master agent that looks all over it and says, here you go. Here's the daily report or whatever frequency you want to see it at.
Exactly. So
this has actually gone in a completely different direction than I was anticipating because, first we're asking, raising the question of what do you consider trash? How do you define trash? What trash might you have in your environment? What do you want to do with trash? And all of a sudden we've done this pivot that says, hey, you want a really good use case for agentic AI in your environment? Here you go. We don't get hacked by Hazy Hawk. That's a pretty good use case, like reducing overall risk by deploying agentic AI to do IT house cleaning is actually kind of a big freaking deal.
Without over trusting the AI, yes, I concur. And I will simply pull up another cliche in support of the idea, which is one man's trash is another man's treasure, in this case, Hazy Hawks.
Yeah. Now, so here's a question. I'm imagining myself listening to this and going, oh, fun. I can transition my sort of gross, gunky, trash-filled IT environment into a really cool use case where I get a gold star inside my company for deploying AI in a meaningful sense. I think the one thing that I would hesitate on, and I'll ask this question of you, John, is like, how risky is this Hazy Hawk stuff? Is this really going to affect me? Like, if I go to the CIO and I say, hey, listen, I want your approval to build this thing out because we are at risk. How big is that risk? And I know we don't have a formal risk assessment where we can say it's a 72.4 on the 100-point scale, but I don't think you need one. Like gut sense. Is this bad, kind of bad, very bad?
It depends on what kinds of things you do as a company. But if you are in the building software space frequently, this is going to be a high risk thing for you. And if you are in the heavily consuming open source, pulling things down and building them space, this may affect you pretty intensely as well between the two attacks described and things in that space. If you are, on the other hand, an all SaaS shop or a 99% SaaS shop and you don't develop much and you don't host your own resources and you don't build a lot of open source packages to run on your own resources, maybe this isn't something that you need to worry about as much. Although even there, of course, there's going to be trash to take out, abandoned accounts, abandoned privilege sets, all the usual identity house cleaning that folks are loath to do on a regular basis, but that results in credential creep in almost every environment.
Okay, so basically what we've come down to is this, that if you have been listening along and agree that the trash needs to be taken out and are among the 99.9% of organizations, I made that statistic up, that don't actually have a process for doing this on a regular basis, now might be an excellent time to test drive agentic AI as a solution for this, as we've just talked about, building in that multiple layers of human intervention. Because the nice thing, as soon as I modularize this in my mind, you think each work domain, networking, development, etc., identity might have its own agent. each of those agents could pop to the subject matter expert in that space before it all bubbles all the way up and major decisions need to get made at the top. So that comes back to the whole layer cake model that we are pushing hard for AI, which is not, just to be clear about layer cakes are about embedding human intervention iteratively in the process, not feeding the AI with a bunch of things and then trying to assess everything at the far end. And the reason that's incredibly important is because the task of doing that assessment can be overwhelming if you don't do it on an iterative basis. If you don't constantly groom as you're going through the process and constantly train, not train in the technical sense, but train the flow, so to speak. So interesting, John.
And I want to put my oar back in the water for building it into your processes up front to not leave waste behind, so that the cleanup processes aren't the only thing you're relying on to close these kinds of gaps and fill these kinds of flaws in your environment. Get back into the process that you're building out for building software, whether it's stuff you're downloading and compiling in the open source categories or software you're actually writing in-house, and build into the process tracking of the things that you allocate and the things that you stop using.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say necessary but not sufficient. And of course, coming back to the old house metaphor, anybody who's ever baked a cake or cooked dinner knows the old adage, clean up as you go along.
Yes.
This does, of course, end up, and I will point out that it is supremely inefficient because you end up wiping the stove 57 times instead of once. So I am not sure I'm 100% in agreement that it's always a great idea, but it's general directionally correct. Let's put it that way. Certainly, if there's a dirty dish that you know for sure you're not going to use again, don't leave it on the counter, put it in the dishwasher or wash it while something else is bubbling on the stove. So that's what I would sort of temper your recommendation by, number one, not assuming that if it's built into the process, everything is solved. And number two, be smart about it. Some stuff just doesn't need to be cleaned up every single second, even if you have the wherewithal to do it. There's still human attention required. So yeah, if something can live until the end of the build or whatever before getting scrubbed, let it do that.
No argument here.
Yeah, you were looking kind of skeptical. So, guys, this is a little bit shorter than obvious, but I'd like to than normal. Excuse me, but I'd like to think it's jam packed with some good insights because it certainly wasn't where we were headed coming into it, or maybe you were. You had that in your hip pocket, John. But I do think it's a very, very interesting argument to get to a good use case for agentic AI in IT environments, from clean up your trash as you go and on a regular basis. And hopefully some of you have looked at this and said, this is a really good best practice. I'll get into it. And also, if you have any tools that you found that have been super helpful for this, do let us know.
Yeah.
You can reach us as you are well aware. You can reach us at packetpushers.net/FU or packetpushers.net/follow-up if you wish to spell it out. We'd love to hear from you on your thoughts on this. Also at packetpushers.net, you'll find the Network Break podcast, which helps you stay current on the latest tech news and what it means. Very relevant as you grapple with issues of IT strategy and where to go. There's a whole lot more on the Packet Pushers site as well, including other tech and networking podcasts, our newsletter, Slack, lots of fun things. And if you want to talk to Jonna or John, you can reach us at nemertes.com. That's NEMERTES.com. John would like you to know that that's November, Echo, Mike, Echo, Romeo, Tango, Echo, Sierra.com, as opposed to N like Nancy, E-M like Mary. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.